So if you don't know me, I'm Patrick Krisak. I'm the Director of Faith Formation and Missionary Discipleship in the Archdiocese of Boston. We're very happy to have you join us this evening. Tonight we'll be talking about putting relationships before catechesis. And this is part of our youth ministry series. At some point, I'll put a link in the chat sorry, I've got stuff popping up. It won't go away. Put a link in the chat to the other videos in the series and our other youth ministry resources online, including other in-person and virtual events and different things like that. Last month, we were talking about relating to young people. Next month, we'll be talking about music as it relates to youth ministry. And then the month after that, we have Father Dennis from the seminary talking about, well, bring your tough questions, and he will be available to help you answer some of the questions that might stump you. So for tonight, for putting relationships before catechesis, we have Jeanne Cregan, who's the pastoral associate at Holy Family in Duxbury, and Father Kevin Lever, who's the parochial vicar for the Braintree parishes of St. Francis and St. Clare. How it's going to work is Jean's going to lead us in a little opening prayer. I'm going to talk briefly about the topic and then ask our panelists some questions. And then if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and we might ask you to unmute or put them in the Q&A. If you have comments, you can put those in the chat, and we will be relatively informal for our conversation together this evening. So Jeanne, why don't you start us off with prayer?
Great. Thank you. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Dear God, thank you for bringing each of us here tonight from wherever we have come and whatever our day has looked like. Give us the time and space to think about the ways that we serve you. We thank you for all of the people who are gathered here tonight, for their focus on serving you and for working with young people within your church. And we ask that you send your spirit upon us this evening, that we might have a fruitful discussion and take away the many ways that we might do our ministry in service to you. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much for that. So, putting relationships before catechesis. This is not in any way to downplay the importance of catechesis. We all love catechesis. We all think it's very important, but we know from Catechesi Tradendae that catechesis is a moment in a process of evangelization. And we think that one of the problems we've had, one of the challenges we've faced, is that while the resources available for catechesis are truly excellent that are out there, and it's really fun to get to use them and share them with other people, a lot of the time we're offering catechesis to people whose attitude or response to it is, so what? They don't have a relationship with us or with Christ or with the church from which they can understand that process of catechesis that we so eagerly want to share with them. So tonight we're talking about how we connect these pieces and how we think about pre-evangelization and trust building and evangelization and proclaiming the good news and charismatic catechesis, that where the good news is worked in, who is Jesus, what does he mean to us, why does that matter to us, that's woven into our catechesis and our work with people, and that we need to get to know them as well. We need to earn the right to be heard, to share this message of Christ with them, so that they're ready to receive catechesis and they're able to respond to it. It's sort of like, for a farming analogy, tilling the soil before you plant. You're not going to plant on rocky ground. If you till the soil, you're going to have much more success. That it's much more apt to receive the message that you're trying to share. So I will leave it at that for now, because I don't want to give away what our panelists have to say. So why would Jeanne, Father, why would you not start with catechesis, or why is it important to put relationships first? I just gave sort of a kind of a high level answer, but what does that mean in the work that you've done in your parishes and your assignments?
Jeanne, would
Yeah,
you like?
no, you can go first. That's
Okay,
fine. I don't mind.
sure. So, like Patrick said, my name is Father Kevin. Just a little bit of my background with youth ministry. I have been a priest here in the Archdiocese for the last 8, almost 9 years. Um, I was a high school Spanish teacher and youth minister for 5 years before, right out of college. And I had been volunteering with my high school youth group with Life Teen in Stoughton from when I was in freshman or sophomore year at Bridgewater State. So since I was 19, so for the last 21 years, I've been in the field of youth ministry and relational ministry and catechesis. Here at the parish, I'm in charge of our confirmation program, which is right now grades 7 and 8. We've made that switch down. May will be our first 8th grade confirmation class. So I think one of the reasons that we say relationship needs to come first goes back to that quote attributed to Teddy Roosevelt. They don't care what you know until they know that you care,
Mm.
right? A lot of young people today, even over the last, I would say, over the last 7 years. I was going to say 6, 7, but we know how that is right now. Over the last, 5 to 7 years, particularly with COVID, things changed, even in youth ministry, and there's not a level of trust and authority figures that was there when I was in high school, where like just because somebody's in a position of authority, you trust what they're teaching you, what they're telling you. You need to know somebody. You need to have a relationship with somebody before they care anything you have to say. And so when we say relationship before catechesis, we're not saying, like Patrick said, catechesis isn't important, because it's fundamental. It's how we echo on our faith through the ages. But what we are saying is that catechesis kind of presumes a yes, that's not necessarily there yet. Catechesis presumes a yes to being open to and learning the faith, when we might be with young people who, of course, are there just because their parents are forcing them to be there, or so that they can, get the checklist. And really, we're not just forming students to receive sacraments, but we're helping form young people into lifelong disciples, to follow a person, not to follow an idea, to follow Jesus, to be in relationship with him. So that's why I say, this relationship is fundamental before diving into a catechetical curriculum or argument or whatever.
Jeanne, anything
So,
you'd like to add?
well, so first, just to give you a little bit of my own background there, is that I also was a high school teacher and a campus minister. And then I did youth ministry, and I've done faith formation director, and I work as a pastoral associate now, where I supervise the faith formation programs that happen here at Holy Family. And I think even as a very young teacher in a high school where like catechesis was education was the goal, right? Like there was the campus ministry program, but even as a very new teacher in the classroom, it was very obvious that kids could spit back facts if I taught them. Do you know what I mean? But they didn't internalize any of it. And it was within this community where we were supposed to be teaching them to grow in faith, And if I looked back at that very early time of being a teacher, um, without any training to be a teacher, I learned to be a teacher alongside other teachers that invested in me, that spent time with me, that taught me, you know what I mean? And it's the exact same premise. I feel like the kids needed not just to know that you cared, but that you were invested in this possible relationship. And then in parish life, I just feel like, thinking of my own upbringing, even back to when I was a kid, that it was all part of my family as well. And I think that a lot of our kids come without that now, without that support of their family. So when we kind of presume a yes, give them these facts and information, and they have no place to process it or to further understand it. And there was a time, I would say, even when I was working as a youth minister, which was like 20 years ago now, that the kids were there for like all 12 years or all 10 years of formation. So you had some time to help them understand the information you were saying. Over time, you were, explaining concepts and ideas. They had time to learn them. But like a lot of times now we see people for at least here on this, we see people a lot in and out very quick. There's a very short period of time. So for anything that we want to impact catechetically, if we don't know them and love them and show them a lived, breathed faith that this is part of who we are, then there's not enough authenticity for them they're just going to check that box, and move along and get something. And that's the
So
last thing we want.
the question I have is I would hope that people, when you've got somebody right in front of you, that you can talk to them and recognize them as a person and hear what their concerns are. And I think of Sherry Waddell talking about never accept a label in place of a story.
Mm.
People declare things about themselves, and you can unpack that. And maybe if you're not comfortable with that, then maybe you could watch the recording from last month's session, which isn't up yet, but we're working on it. Um, but my question is, you've both been teachers and youth ministers and leaders of programs and supervisors of other people, and you've structured and restructured faith formation programs. So when you look at, a lot of people are out there kind of with their traditional faith formation programs and youth ministry activities and different things like that. And that's not bad. They're trying to do the Lord's work, right? But how do you structure a program to account for this need to put relationships first? Like, how do you build in relationship building into a parish program or parish life?
Do you want to? I can
You
answer
go
that a little
first.
bit.
Yeah.
Go for
We're
it.
a little bit parish wide, actually, um, trying to incorporate a little bit more. Um, when someone inquires both in faith formation, right? So like when someone comes in to register for faith formation, one of our primary years, right, is like kindergarten and confirmation. And the directors of those programs are now like meeting with families as they register, as opposed to simply like registering a family so that we have some sense of where that people are coming from. That doesn't always get the student, that gets more the parent, but at least we know it gives us the story, right? It gives us like why people are doing that. And we're starting to adopt it actually sort of parish wide when someone inquires about, serving in a ministry, someone who's, and it reaches out to my pastor or to someone else, he'll say like, oh, if you could just get in touch with Jeanne. And I try to get people to come in and kind of tell us, what's your story? Like, what's your journey, so that we can find the ways that we can kind of like speak into it. So that's a very, not easy because it takes a lot of time, right? But it's a way to get to know the family and know their story a little bit before they start the traditional catechesis. There's a whole lot more to the relationship building, right, through ministry, but at least that's a starting point so that you're not just looking at a blank sea of we do family faith formation, so that helps the kids are with their parents a lot of the time. So it's not a blank sea of people that we don't know, because we at least met them. Either myself or the director of that program has kind of had a visit with them beforehand.
I
Father?
think to exactly everything Jean just said, but I think also to add on to that would be, and now I'm trying to think of the word, but as I describe it, the word will definitely come to me. Um, Consistency. There we go.
Oh
Consistency
yeah.
Hmm.
is, particularly when you are in a situation where, like we felt this year like we had to jump right into curriculum, because of how our collaborative decided to kind of trickle down confirmation from 10th grade to 8th grade.
Mhm.
We ended up having two confirmation ceremonies a year for the last, or four a year for the last 2 years. So we did the traditional sophomores in May of 2024 when Cardinal Sean first, dropped the age down. And then we did another one in December. So our December kids were in 10th grade, they were sophomores, but they only did a year and a half at the program. And then we did one in June last year for ninth graders. So they only had a year, an extensive year. And then we did another one this past December for ninth graders who did a year and a half. But our eighth graders that will be confirmed this coming May have 2 years in the program. So they had last year seventh graders, this year's eighth graders. So there was more time last year with them to do community building exercises, small group exercises, uh, but that consistency of, okay, these six teens know that they will always be with Jean, and they
Yeah.
start to develop that relationship versus,
Mhm.
bouncing around from small group to small group each week,
Yeah.
because they're never going to build that trust, one with each other or with their leader. And So, you could have the best PowerPoints or Zooms or uh, what's the other one? Google Slides or
Yeah.
whatever in the world. But if they don't trust you or the people that they're with, you're not going to get anywhere in your curriculum or in your catechesis.
I have follow-up questions for both of you. Now, Jean, you talked about family catechesis. Now, is there a point, at what ages have family catechesis? Is there a point you start seeing the young people without their parents or their families for confirmation or anything like that? Or,
So with the change, it used to be ninth and 10th grade. The kids kind of came on their own with just, they have 2 or 3 sessions a year where their parents are invited to join with them. So we've done like prayer experiences or retreat type things when their parents are with them. But this is the first year that we have, because last year we confirmed 3 grades, right? Eighth, ninth, and 10th grade.
yeah,
So this year we have just eighth graders, and they're coming kind of on their own. They just had an intro session with their parents. So up through seventh grade, they come with their parents. And then just try to incorporate them a little bit later, but it's a little bit in flux. It's
yeah,
kind of trial by error, kind of learning. Because, um, and the great thing about the eighth grade is that they're still, somewhat connected, right? So we kind of get them straight through. There's not like kind of like a big lapse. The harder part is training catechists to be relational with eighth graders. They're just a different maturity level. The kids,
yep.
people who've been teaching confirmation, so getting to know them and what they care about, do you know what I mean,
Hmm.
is a little bit different than getting to know what an 11th grader might care about, um, or a
Yeah.
high school student. Yeah.
I really like that because you have the family formation, you have the relationship with the family, and that continues, but you're also trying to have the relationship with the student, or the young person, and that's great. That's a really good point. That relationship in the context of the family as a middle schooler, as a high schooler student, it's going to be different in those places, and you gotta adjust for that.
Yeah.
My follow-up for you is you talked about small groups, but also, needing to build those relationships so that you could work through the curriculum. How do you balance that? We have these things, these topics we need to get through, we need to cover, but we also want the small group leaders to have the relationship. Does that just happen organically over time? Do you invest more up front in that? And what's the small group versus the large group balance?
I think this year has been more of a challenge. We had some uh, we moved locations based off of where we've been the last couple of years. So our space is a little different. We used to have classrooms that we could do breakout sessions into. So it'd be you six people go with her, you six go with him,
Yeah.
etc. In an ideal year, we would spend the first couple weeks uh, in the same small group, getting to know whoever their small group leader for, uh, whether we do it for that semester or for that whole school year will be. And basically, it comes down to that person's faith sharing. What will the catechist share with their small group about their faith journey, about their relationship with Jesus, about how they came to want to be part of the church and want to be a disciple, and how
Mm.
they feel called to discipling others, particularly the young church. So I still think we're ironing out the way that we think will work best here in Braintree. I, I I was actually this afternoon I was at the gym, and a senior who was in the program 2 years ago saw me, and I have not seen him since confirmation. Well, that's not true. He was his brother's sponsor in December, but um, I haven't seen him in a while, but he came right up to me. And he had been in my small groups several times when he was in 10th grade. And so he came right up to me, said hi. I asked how senior year going. We did not talk about faith at all, but we talked for maybe 5 minutes just about senior year. Where's he
I-
applying to school? What's he want to study? Is he going to play sports? And so he might not remember anything that was said in that class, but he knew he could still, come up, and that's where, to me, and that's where the relationship eventually will get to a point where I can say like, "Hey, if I keep seeing you at the gym, when am I going to see you back at church?
Yeah.
Uh, and it won't feel cold, or it won't feel like I'm judging him because that relationship already exists. Meanwhile, if it's somebody that I know their name, I know they were in my program, but I just say like, "Hey, haven't seen you at mass in a while,"
Yeah.
comes across as judgmental, and then they don't want to come back.
Yeah.
Um, if that answers part of your
Absolutely.
question.
Well, so Jean,
And
now I'm curious for you because you talked about trying to relate to the eighth graders is different than relating to the ninth and tenth graders. Would you have anything to add to what Father said about figuring out that relationships versus curriculum dynamic?
well, I think some of what you just said at the end, though, just reminds me that like sometimes we can think about it's youth based, right? That the kids want to be known, but really that's what we all want, right? Like we all want to walk into church on Sunday and have Father recognize us,
Yeah,
right? Like someone know or someone remember that I said I was going on vacation, right? And part of the problem with that, like the struggle with that, is that our churches are so big, right? So, like we think we're losing people, but there's hundreds of people, right, on a weekend. So to remember everybody's name and know who they are, right,
right.
is so hard, but that's kind of what we all want. Do you know what I mean? I go to the grocery store. Said before this started that I don't live very far from where I work, and I go to the grocery store and I bump into a family in the grocery store, and a little kid or a teenager, and with their parents, and their parents will say, "Oh, I'm really sorry we haven't been to church." Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I just want to talk to you about what's going on. Like, I'm always grateful when there's a child there, so you can say like, "How's the sports season?" or "What are you playing
Right.
today?" or those kind of things. Like you see a kid, the eighth graders, one of the things for me is because they're so varied. I think scheduling's a challenge with eighth grade because they don't follow like a high school schedule like
Hmm.
the older kids did, but they play a lot of sports and they come like, one of my favorite things is when they come in their sports uniform is just to be like, "Hey, do you have a soccer practice today?" Or "Do you have a game?" And instead of saying like, "Well, why are you coming to church looking like," do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, what do
Hmm.
you have? It's like you see the kid light up. It's kind of like what we all want, right? So
Hmm.
you seeing it in the gym, the grocery store, wherever it is, we all just want to be known and recognized. So I think in that way, the eighth graders are the same as the high schoolers, and they're the same as we are as adults,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
The
Well,
challenge is the depth of conversation that you get out of an eighth. Like it takes more time
Right.
to teach an eighth grader how to respond to certain questions, right? How to do it. They need a movement break every now and then,
yep,
whereas a high school student has a little bit more ability to,
Yeah.
I think, Gene, what you're getting at is I think, I don't know if they still call it this, but like the Jesus method, of course, is like, well, Jesus made people feel like they
yeah,
belonged because they
right.
do belong. And so having that feeling like that's how I got involved in my high school youth group. I was there once. And then I came back a few weeks later, and one of the youth group leaders said, "Oh, how's cross country going?" And I was like, "You remember
Yeah.
that I run cross country? Like I was here a month ago." But I felt like, wow, that this person listened to what I said the first time I was here. Maybe I can listen to what this person has to say because I belong. And in catechesis, like belonging sometimes uh, will precede whether or not they believe, right? Like if they feel like they belong at our youth group or at our confirmation classes or religious ed classes or whatever, but they don't know necessarily what they believe, by belonging, they open themselves up to what we want to teach them, and then their their belief will then kind of precede the change in their behavior. Like we have a very very involved senior young man who he gave his witness talk to our freshmen before they were confirmed this year, and he had been asking me for months if he could share his story. So uh, he just got up and shared with them that he didn't want to be in confirmation class the entire year. And he went to mass once on his own. Like he woke up one day and was like, "I want the Eucharist. I don't know why." Um, and when he saw that it was me that was preaching, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna walk out," because he knows that if he sees me, he'll know that I'm here and he'll want to talk to me. and I'm not in the mood to talk to Father Kevin. Well, I mean, now he talk like if he goes without talking to me for like a week, I feel like he goes crazy because he always has questions. But it's that sense of belonging, like you know where you belong, and so you're more invested in what these adults have to say to me or what they want to teach me, and uh, we can help build that discipling process from that.
It reminds me we used to do some workshops and certificates in evangelization, best practices, and things like that. And when we were talking about forming disciples and accompanying people, I tried to remind, because you've got really churchy people who are very comfortable in church and want to be in church, who are doing this and want to share it with other people, and that's all good. But I just had to remind them, don't underestimate how scary church, priest, faith conversations are for people. Like they feel like they're seeing Jeanne in the grocery store and they're feeling judged because they're not at mass. And that's not, it's like we're not saying we don't want them to be at mass. We
Right.
absolutely do, but
Mm,
we have to kind of allay that fear and take it down a notch so that we meet them on that human level and that can allow other stuff to happen.
yeah.
So I think you've both alluded to this in some of your comments, but what are some roadblocks you've encountered in trying to put relationships first as a lead into catechesis? Could be with the leadership pastors you've worked for, or with catechists who were not comfortable or familiar with this idea for a change, or staff members, or families who were just not sure what to make of it. What are some challenges you've faced in kind of using this relationships before catechesis approach to formation and evangelization?
Um, I think so. Obviously, as a priest, I am not a parent. I'm not married. I don't have children. I think sometimes, like I always want parents to be my allies, but sometimes it feels like they can be more of a roadblock. If I'm trying to teach my catechists how to get involved in like relational ministry, like go to their sporting events, go to their plays, go to their concerts. You see them in the gym or you see them at the supermarket. Don't be afraid to go up and say like, "Oh, hey Johnny, how are you?" Whatever it is. But sometimes when the parents aren't invested in that same level of faith, it just comes off as, the zealous priest who just wants to make me Catholic, or, oh, well, Father Kevin just wants more priests, so he always talks to the boys about priesthood. Well, yes, but no, but so I think parents have sometimes become a roadblock. Another one is, and this, I take responsibility in my parish for this, but I think sometimes uh, I focus too much on what I'm doing to prepare for the lesson that I haven't necessarily prepared my catechists, my team, as well as they should be. So I gave them a binder at the beginning of the year with all of my lessons and what I plan to do, but that time to form them spiritually is equally as important if I'm expecting them to then be able to enter into relationship with our young people. Like I need to model that for them, with them, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
those are two that I thought of. And I'm sure as Jeanne speaks, I'll probably think of more roadblocks.
Well, one I was going to say, I want to come back to the parent thing in a minute, but one I was going to say is purely time, and it just comes from a different number, a different level. There's so many different ways that it affects time. If I'm honest from my own experience, like I wouldn't be sitting here without the time that my own parish priest poured into me, like at a time, that was very formational for myself. I'm in my 50s. I had lunch with that priest today. Do you know what I mean? Like that has been, but and it's been the place I go to with questions when I'm, professionally or faith-based or life decisions, that's the same person. But there were also, I grew up in a rectory or a parish where the rectory had 5 priests in it at any given time, right? And now I'm in a parish where there's one priest, there's me as a pastoral associate, a faith formation person. Do you know what I mean? There's not like a plethora of, and so training volunteers, training catechists and stuff, like Father Kevin just said, is so important. Pouring ourselves into them so that they can be that to other people is, so it's time consuming on both sides, because you're trying to be relational in ministry, but also train other people to be able to do that at the same time. And there are only so many hours in a day, right? So you do kind of have to utilize those, like you said, the opportunity at the gym, right? Like that's a prize moment. So at least it's just part of your day. So I do think that time is a significant roadblock. So it's much more efficient to just teach a lesson. Right? It's much more efficient to put 80, well, we have probably like 80 kids in confirmation prep, 8th grade, I think, 80, 85 kids. You put them all in a room and just teach a lesson. But to get to know them and to understand them and to try to, see that is a little bit more difficult. And I think with parents, I think they're largely roadblocks, often roadblocks, until they feel understood. Do you know what I mean? I think language is really important. And I think we encounter a lot of parents who have felt that judged. Do you know what I mean? Like that feel like when we say things, negative about their sports practices, or, that sports, in the town we live in, people will say, well, sports makes this town, you know what I mean, operate or whatever. But sports in and of itself aren't bad, right? And the fact that they're busy on different teams isn't in and of itself bad. We just need to relate to them in a way that they put this faith becomes among, you know what I mean, among their priorities.
Right.
And I think the key to that is them not feeling that our language is negative, or not negative, that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, that we're speaking in a way that's what they're doing is not right. Because some of them are very shy, you know what I mean,
Right.
about being here at all. And they're unchurched. So they feel totally out of their realm, right? I don't know.
Right.
Father, did
So
you think of any other roadblocks? Okay, if you didn't, but since you
Well,
mentioned
with time, of course, that can be a roadblock. But I think I was more thinking time in a larger picture of like, you know, and I don't mean to offend anybody with their cameras off, but there are always going to be old church ladies, right? Like there are always the church ladies that you can depend on to always be there and whatnot. But like you have high school youth, like for the time that they're in high school. You have middle school youth for the time that they're in middle school. And so time becomes a roadblock because you're like, okay, well,
Mhm.
there's 2000 years of everything to condense into 45-minute sessions, twice a month for 8 months. And but you don't get 45 minutes because you have to check them in and you have to settle them down and you have to answer weird questions. And while they're checking in, you want to be connecting with some of them. And so, your lesson might actually only be 35 minutes. And so, like, in a sense, like up against the clock in that time because, the studies that keep showing, like, if they don't have a foundational relationship by X amount, X year, then they're lost, which of course that's not necessarily true. But um, I think time in that sense, I look at it as a roadblock.
I think too, just to kind of add on to that too, in terms of time, is that because, and I'm sure Father Kevin had the same experience, but I was a high school teacher, right? Like you have lots of time when you're a high
Yeah.
school teacher. Like there's a curriculum you have to get through, but there's a lot of time and you consistently see someone day after day after day, right?
Mhm.
Like if you're meeting once a week or once every other week or once a month or whatever the week, and someone misses the time, do you know what I mean? Do you
Mhm.
remember, who they were or what they
Right.
told you or those kind of things? So time can kind of work against you in that sense too, I think, or sometimes. But
Yeah.
I do think
Absolutely.
that at least here, I think too, one of the things is that Father Kevin mentioned earlier was going to activities and things. So here, I feel like we've really tried to dial in like what are really prime things. Like we can't get to every sporting event, do you know what I mean? But for some reason, the theater production in Duxbury is a really big deal. right? Like there's just a lot of people there. There's a lot of parishioners there that don't have kids. There's a lot of little kids going to see older kids, but like it
Mm.
just seems to be. So we pretty much go to every theater production. You know what I mean? Like trying to
Hmm.
manage it that way and see where you get the most.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And even when we don't have a chance to talk to them because they're on the field or whatnot, they know. They know
Yeah.
when you were there. And it you could be there for a quarter or for the entire game or for the first act or whatever, but they will know, oh, Father Kevin came to my game. Father Kevin was at my play. And they they recognize it. So you want to jump on those moments
Right.
and say like, well, yeah, you know why I was there? Because I care about you and I care
Mhm.
about your interests. And I think that's something, particularly as somebody who I was in high school when the scandal broke here in Boston. I was on my confirmation retreat when the scandal broke. And we got back to the church parking lot, and so many parents picked up my classmates, and they did not get confirmed later that year. But like as somebody who came of age, I guess, during that scandal, uh, my youth group leaders never stopped saying, I love you. I love you. I care about you. Um, Even though culturally it became very weird for people in church circles to like, why are the youth group leaders coming to high school sporting events? Why are they this and that? And to be kind of countercultural and to go against that, like nobody bats an eye when I go to Archbishop Williams events because it's a Catholic high school. But
Mhm.
when I go to Braintree High School events, people are like, who's the guy in black? Um, and here in Braintree, we have four middle schools and four high schools. The public school, and then there are three privates: Archbishop Williams, Thayer Academy, and Katz Academy. And it, you know, we get kids in the religious ed program from all of them. And so, how do you balance then time balancing? Like, well, I don't want to let these kids think that I don't love them, you know, any less than I love these ones because I can only get to this event. And,
Mhm.
like Jeanne was saying, there's so many things, but we have to make effort to go to at least some. Um,
So we've talked about some of the challenges. We've talked about some of your hopes or some examples of what you um, hope will come from different relationships that you've had. Um, can you, is there any particular example that you could call out or point to where um, putting the relationship first and doing that, making that effort, doing that work, bore fruit, that it led to catechesis and a desire for that, and it led to conversion and an ongoing relationship? Is there an example from your different ministry circumstances that you would like to call out or kind of share with us?
I think this is your time to go first.
Um, I was I was kind of thinking about it, and I think that there's a few I think situations I would say without like long drawn out stories. Like I could think of
Yeah.
individuals, but with long stories. But there were a couple of occasions I would say where like when we had middle school catechesis or high school catechesis here and meeting at the same times where I wasn't one of the small group leaders, where I was kind of like floating around. And I could think of a couple different examples where teachers were kind of like frustrated. Do you know what I mean? Like, or like feeling like things weren't going well, like their classes were really quiet and I was giving them discussion questions and, and it wasn't kind of realizing the fruit, and was able to just kind of step in and say like, hey, what'd you guys do this weekend? Do you know what I mean? And like
Mhm.
talk to kids for a little while and kind of model that ability to just kind of
Mhm.
chat with them and giving catechist, and Father Kevin hit on this a little bit earlier, but giving catechists permission to like share their own faith, as like people sometimes think like they have to follow the curriculum, right? Like if you spend 20 minutes of a class and you're sharing your devotion to the rosary and your reasons for that and how that kind of has an impact on your life. Like that's way more effective than so it's kind of like I've seen a few times, sometimes it's mentoring the teachers to be able to catechists to think that way. You know what I mean? Like we try not to call them teachers or catechists. We try to call them small group leaders, you know what I mean? Facilitators, like different titles so that it doesn't feel so that they're more in that kind of same genre with a group of people. And I've seen that happen quite a few, like a number of times in different ways. Um, that was one example that I kind of thought of. I don't know.
Thank you.
I know it wasn't written by Archbishop Oscar Romero, but
Oh,
I remember the prayer for the team, which was
Yeah.
something that when I
yeah.
was in high school and college, my high school youth group leader always used for
Yeah.
the confirmation team, retreat team, team building. And I always go back to the line like we may never see the fruit of the seeds that we've sown, but we sow anyway. Like we're workers, we're not the builders. And just something that happened last week, I had marriage prep with a couple that they're getting married in February, and uh, I had when I first met them, the groom said that he had gone to a certain school. And I said, "Oh, that's close to Stoughton." And he said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "Oh, have you ever gone to Town Spa?" So, if you're not from Stoughton, Town
Pizza.
Spa Pizza. Yeah. So, some people know. Some people know. So he's like, "I never made it there in 4 years at school." And I just shook my head at him. And he's like, "I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He said, "Well, maybe our next meeting should be at Town Spa." So, it was. Um,
Nice.
but it was then, like the townie, our waitress was like, "Are you Kevin?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She's like, "I remember when you were in high school." And great. Um, but but I saw from our booth, I saw a young dad holding his infant son, and I was like, and so I yelled, "Rob!" And this kid turned around. He had been, he's only 5 years younger than me, but he had been in my confirmation class his ninth, 10th, and 11th grade years at Immaculate Conception in Stoughton. And we kept in touch over the years. I celebrated his wedding 2 years ago. And so he came right over, shook my hand, introduced me to the baby, who's not, a baby is 16 months, still a baby. But then he pointed to his wife, and so she came up. But when I got up to hug her, I could hear him, I heard him say Kevin. And I turned but he stopped talking. But once they left, the bride and the groom that I was meeting with were like, "That's so great that he still thinks of you like that after all these years." And I said, "What what did he say?" And they're like, "That when he was 15, he blah 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 in your confirmation class." And I said, "Yep, yeah, he did." And I was not happy then, and I'm not happy now. But it didn't affect our relationship, and he still, like, he said, like, "Oh, we're expecting another one, we're doing May, this one we want to make sure you're the one baptizing him," and da, 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 da. So, like, something that, you know this he was a kid in my class for 3 years, and it's become like a lifelong bond. Is one of the success, I guess, stories.
So going back to thank you, that's awesome. The thinking about people in a parish trying to take this approach. I think you gave some good examples about just doing it, modeling it. What is if you're going to go into a situation where you're trying to encourage catechists or leadership in this kind of direction of fostering relationship, what's important to have in place? What do you need to keep in mind for this to go well at a parish? Because I think, Father, you mentioned some examples of some really difficult times in our history where it was important to be careful about doing it in an appropriate way. And
Mhm.
that's, of course, still important now. So what do you need in place for this to go well in your ministry or in the parish?
I mean, exactly what you just said. I mean, we are in the Archdiocese of Boston. We do have a code of conduct, ministerial conduct, uh, and then typically whatever youth ministry program a parish would use, if it's something like Life Teen, they would say the same thing to you of, when you are entering into like relationship with teens, you know, one, you always need to make sure like parental involvement is paramount, like that parents know that you're invested in their kids' lives, that it's not just class on Sunday and church, but you are there to show them what a Catholic life looks like. And you are there to support them, not just on their faith journey, but their academic journey, their athletic journey, their whatnot. Um, but when I was in Bridgewater as a youth minister, we used to uh, call it, well, they call it C squared, uh, core member squared. So you wouldn't go to a youth ministry event or like a sporting event or a theater production or whatever if another youth leader wasn't able to come with you. So that way there's always two of you. Uh, I for various reasons, sometimes that is not able to happen, which is fine. But like at that point, then you be careful of the one-on-ones and like in public areas and always being visible and from I guess the legality standpoint of it, but more so from the practical point of it, I think uh, just be you know we're still we are it, still vulnerable as youth leaders and as priests, as catechists, as pastoral associates, because we work for the church, because we represent the church. So whether it's the grocery store or whether it's the sporting event or the theater production, uh, how we present ourselves is going to reflect then positively or negatively on that person's view of church. And so I don't know if Gina has anything to add.
I was going to go from the obviously the safety part is important, but I think we've kind of covered that part. But I think the second part is like the authenticity of the adult and like the complementarity of like the laity and the clergy. So I feel like for us, like there's a lot of times that I funnel something to be like, isn't it so great that Father Bob's at the theater production? Do you know what I mean? Like that, like, because we want to see that, like, oh, Father Kevin's
Yeah.
here. Like, we want, because that carries a certain like weight of interest and there's an opportunity there. And I think on the other side, there's that I often have opportunities where, I'm on the soccer field because one of my kids is playing. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm with an adult or a family, the kids are like, oh, look, you know what I mean? There's the lady, one time I was taking tickets at a theater event that my child was in, and the little girl came up and said, "You're the lady from church." Do you know what I mean? And like I didn't know who she was or whatever, but like there's opportunities to like meet people in that very common area and be authentic to who you are and share your Catholic faith. You know what I mean? In the very subtle ways. Like when I taught high school, and I think youth ministry goes the same, it's very clear, like kids can see right through if you like try to be cool or you try to be, but if you're authentically who you are, do you know what I mean? And
Yep.
then they'll respond to your authenticity. Do you know what I mean? So whether that's in my role as a parent or, like living in the community or, in, like I said, in selling tickets, or if it was when you're a teacher, so that when you speak, you're not trying to be something that they, a certain type of person, but rather you're just sharing from your own perspective. And in that case, you can be any variety. They don't just respond to cool people. They respond to people who are willing to like be themselves and share it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I want to put a plug in for last month's session on relating to young people because I think that authenticity piece and being yourself relates to that. So look for that when we get that up. I was looking over here because there's a youth ministry organization called Why Disciple that
Mhm.
they have these stickers that say authenticity is king. I thought I had one over here, but I don't.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
I will try to find a link to it. Is there anything else? I want to give people an opportunity to think about any questions you might have, which you're welcome to uh, raise your virtual hand and we might ask you to unmute or put them in the Q&A. But while folks are thinking of that, is there anything either of you'd like to share that we haven't covered so much so yet tonight?
Looking over my notes.
I was just going to say that on that last point that just kind of struck me is the idea too that like both with parents and with teens being willing to share our um, particularly with when you're have real life examples, right? And when I'm willing to share like with a group of parents where my parenting wasn't the best. Do you know what I mean? But how
Mm.
I have leaned on my faith through that. And if it's like a real story, which any of us that have tried, right, have some
Mhm.
good ones. And I think teens respond to some of those stories too. When you're like, oh, well, one time, like my son or whatever did that. I think that that can be really helpful when we don't kind of
Mm.
hold back our less than perfect or less than ideal scenarios.
Father, anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, uh, the authenticity thing is key. Uh, we used to joke when I was a youth minister, like it's funny, like the teens can tell if we're being fake, like they sense it in adults, but they don't sense it in each other. Like, like,
That is very true.
like, like we like and it works both ways because like we can look at them and be like, oh my gosh, they're being so fake to each other right now, and then we get up and do something, and they're like,
Yeah.
but I've I am a very funny guy. And I see one of my catechists laughing because like I think I'm funny. So like I'll tell jokes to some of the kids before class, and the way that they like look at me, you would think that they think I'm their father telling a bad joke. Uh,
Yeah.
and they're like, that's such a dad joke. And I'm like, you mean a father joke? And then they'll laugh. And but that's it, I'm not hiding it. Like I know that they think it's corny and I
Mm.
think it's hilarious. So I'm gonna keep doing it. And that being one authentic to oneself, because then they learn that it's okay to be their authentic selves. That church is a place for them to belong and to discover who they are and whose image they've been created and whose ultimately they are. Of course, they
Mm.
are God's.
Hmm?
Yeah. Well, here's a question that was not on our prep list, so fair warning. Um, but it relates to that last point. Like, we're talking about putting relationships before catechesis, and we have, trust. The relationship piece is about building trust so that people are curious and they're open, so that you can share the good news of Christ with them and what that means for them, which is a step in between relationships and catechesis, that kind of initial proclamation. And of course, I talked at the beginning about charismatic catechesis, and so the directory for catechesis has a lot to say about that as well. So how do you know when you have enough of a relationship with someone, or that you have an opportunity to push a little bit or introduce a little bit more of going beyond just like you've got enough of a relationship that you can get to the why, get to the witness, get to the charisma, the sharing Jesus.
Dean, I think it's your turn to answer first.
I think sometimes it's just instinct, right? Like
Yep.
what Father Kevin was just sharing about, like telling the jokes or whatever. Like y- they may be dad jokes or whatever, but they're human, right? Like so people respond to that, right? Like people love their dads and their silly jokes, right? Like so so that kind of works. I think it's just like instinct of like taking a chance, and like sometimes you're going to be wrong, right? Like sometimes the person's not going to be open to hearing it, but generally, I think you can see how people like respond to you, and I think it takes a long time to kind of develop that skill, right? Like to see how people respond to you. And I know like I've tried to be like a note writer. Um, I
Mhm.
want to be like a personal, like in my personal life, be a note writer, but I never quite get there. But in professionally, like when I see someone or when someone mentions something to me, I have stationery in my drawer, that Holy Family stationery, and I write out 3 lines on a note and I put it in the mail, right? If that person mentions that note about, some instance or circumstance or whatever, then I know that there's sort of like a conversation. So a lot of times I can then, push a little further or push a little further. And usually it's just kind of listening to, I think, to what they say. Someone will usually, even if it's clouded, especially a younger, like a teenager, if it might be, said in a strange way, or they might ask a question, for a friend, that kind of thing, those kind of trying to disguise it a little bit. And I think you can often see it. However, I think that's the challenge too, because then we're trying to train teams of volunteers to be able to do that and recognize that. And I don't know how to train it. It's like instinct.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just, yeah, to just
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
I was going to say you just know, which is another way of saying like
Yeah.
it's an instinct. Um, I think we talked earlier about the challenge of like being when I was a high school teacher, both when I was a Spanish teacher and when I was a priest teaching theology at Bishop Fenwick. I saw my students 4 days a week, and you see them for 50 minutes at a time. So they do feel, hopefully, they do feel comfortable with you. And you can just tell, like, okay, a student comes to class early, or a student stays a little after class, or a student, kind of lingers or hangs around. You know that that student is starting to feel comfortable with you and trust you and might want to say something. So you just give them the space to be able to do that. Um, we have a very, very, very tragic situation earlier this year. One of our seventh grade students, um, his mom, 39 years old, walked him to the bus stop, walked home to get his younger brother to walk him to the bus stop, didn't feel well, collapsed, and died. And so now the seventh grader and the fifth grader are basically parentless, and they live with their grandparents. Father's not involved in the picture and whatnot. But the seventh grader, no matter what the schedule said, it would say like this is ninth grade class. He would come for weeks. He would every week he would just come to the church and be like, Am I supposed to be here tonight? And so, of course, all of us are like, our hearts are breaking because, like, just read your schedule, buddy. No, but uh, now it's been um, a little over 2 months, almost 3 months, 3 months this week actually, uh, and before Christmas, he came up to me and said something, and I was like, all right. In my head, I was like, he and I are getting to a point now where he's comfortable with me. And, obviously, I will bring up the subject of his mom soon. How are you? How's your brother? What's this been like? I celebrated the funeral and I let them know about it. I told the whole congregation, but I said, I lost my mom a little over a year ago, and I was 38. I can't imagine, blah, 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 blah. So, um, instinctually, like when you can go deeper, I think, in a relationship, but also when you can challenge a teen or a young person. My first assignment in Peabody, we had this kid walking off the street who was sleeping over at a friend's house. The friend's mom was like, "Hey, we go to church on Sunday." He had never been to church, and then he kept coming back week after week. He got involved in the RCIA back then, and then after he was confirmed, he would just show up at the directory, ring the bell, and he'd be like, "Can you open the church? I want to pray." And I'm like, "Well, the church is open because it's 6:30 p.m. So like go on in." Um, but then he would regularly tell me like, "Oh, can you come over and pray with me?" Uh, and after a while, he would start sharing struggles in his life, and eventually I was able to, like, I was like, all right, this kid, you know, has had a rough life, and for some reason he trusts me. And so I could say to him, like, you need to stop XYZ. Like, it's not good for you. This is a toxic relationship or this or that. And like, and say to him, like, you pray more, read your Bible, go to mass, go to confession. Don't come, you don't even have to come to me. Go to confession with, down the street at the other church. And you know, he has told me this, this was six years ago, but I'm still in touch with him. He's 23 now, and he has said, you know, I don't let anybody talk to me the way that I let you talk to me. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, if my mom's boyfriend tried to talk to me the way that you talk to me, I'd hit him. I'm like, "Hmm, okay, well, so that when you like, but I knew that I had that level of trust, which I think is what we all aim for in youth ministry and in discipleship is, does this person trust me enough to help to let me bring them to Jesus, to let me challenge them in their brokenness and in their sinfulness, and have they learned enough about my own journey that they feel comfortable saying, like, you know what, he's not going to judge me, she's not going to judge me, I can open up to this youth group leader or this catechist or this you know church lady or this priest or whatever, and know that they're going to accept me, pray with me, and help me figure it out, help me in this struggle.
Think sometimes too that one of the places where like that Father Kevin referred to is it's funny because you said because I taught Latin and religion when I taught high school, so the same areas, but you earned the right to be heard, right? Because you
Mhm.
were there. The way that you used that word, Patrick, at the beginning, like you earned the right to be heard because they saw you day in and day out, and you showed up, and you know what I mean, and broke open whatever it was that you were trying to teach, and added in those relationship elements. I do find that over time I've been in Duxbury with for a good bit of time with a break in between. So now over longevity, like I've known some families for a very long time. So a sibling was very young when their high school was doing something, and then that one becomes in high school, and then you know them and you reference things. And sometimes that makes them just a little bit easy. It's a little bit easier entry because you
Mhm.
have this like arsenal of knowledge to like bring up to them to kind of test the waters and see if they're kind of open to, how's your brother in college or, wherever he is. And I think sometimes that's really helpful to have like a little bit of history with people because then they feel like at that point you've earned the right. Only earning the right sometimes takes longer in ministry, in parish ministry, than it does when you have a kid 50 minutes day in and day out. Now, I think the flip side can be true too. Sometimes a new face, right, is someone that they talk to. So it can go, you know what I mean, both ways, but it takes an investment of time and effort, like to be visible as well. For those of us that aren't clergy too, like on the weekends, like being around, like
Mhm.
Sundays, like and making that effort, it can be awkward at first, right? When you're new in a place to go into the church and start greeting people and talking to people, but that's the way they start to see that you're just
Mhm.
Yeah,
one of them, and that your faith is important to you.
absolutely. Well, we have not, this has been great. We've not had any hands or questions that I've seen, but I want to give people another chance at that. So I'm not going to keep us here just to keep us here. I've really enjoyed this conversation, but if anybody has any questions they'd like to unmute or type in, Anne, go ahead, unmute.
I don't know if this is weird. I'm a visual learner. And like if you tell me your name, I have to see your name tag and see your face to remember your name. So for my parishes, I'm the director of faith formation, but as far as confirmation goes, I'm just a small group leader. And every week I get this like discussion sheet from the person that organizes it, and I'll write down the girls in my group's name. And when I first had a session with them, I asked them where they went to school or what their favorite ice cream was, things like that. So, but I don't remember that now. Is it weird if I have like a notebook and keep notes?
I would say absolutely not. Like
I
I sometimes I say like I'm just gonna jot down some things so that I remember because this is important to me and it goes that way.
Or a lot of times, right when they, right when they leave, if they're here, if you're talking
Mm.
one-on-one with someone, as soon as they leave, I have it like a notebook that I open up, I put their name at the top and then jot down the things really quick that they said. So I think if a small group is sharing, you could kind of like jot down those kind of things. Some people have great memories and can do it from memory. I
Hmm.
have a decent memory and can do some of it, but I can't do all of it. You know what I mean? So
Can I ask a question? Would you mind?
Go ahead.
Father, I'm chuckling a little bit because I determined through the course of this conversation that we're precisely the same age. And I grew up in Brockton, right next door to Stoughton. So one of these days we need to do a town spa Cape Cod
Let's
pizza.
go.
But that's a separate thing. What I'm thinking about is, and Eugene as well, having such a storied history of working with tons of different kids over the years. I remember what it was like thinking like what worked when I was in high school, of how an adult would gain my trust and what that looked like. I think my question to you, both of you, is in today's context, what is different? Have you noticed anything unique to the current generation of kids, and maybe any pointers to that effect of how right now in today's church, how we can build that trust? Is it different? Is it not? I'm just, you hear a lot of news bits about Gen Alpha and Gen Z, and they do this and they do that. But from both of you in the trenches, what have you seen from today's youth that you could share?
I do think, I was thinking for a second, I do run we have a media person now, but I'm the second person on each of the social media channels. And I do think, I'd like to say it's a teen only thing, but I think we get a lot of inquiries through the parish website from adults, like people want to contact anonymously first, right? So I think that's like a kind of a new ground, or a ground that wasn't always the case to me. We can't assume that people will come. Like they kind of seem to test the waters first. So working on our responses to things like that, like how we word things,
Mm.
is all geared towards getting that person in person, whether they're a teenager or adult, is a chance to meet that person face to face, because that's how ministry is done best, right? I do think that kids are, I think, I mean, my kids are 16, 19, and 20, and I do think that kids now that I see through parish are even busier than mine were. Do you know what I mean? I definitely resisted a little bit of it sometimes, but now I feel like, like kids are just, their schedules are crazy from like kindergarten on. Not, you know what I mean? Not just before this session, I was meeting with a couple for a convalidation, and they had to rush because they had to pick their son up from baseball training, and it's February, so there's no baseball outside, and he's in third grade. Do you mean like people are, so I think that's another thing that's put a lot of pressure on ministry, is that like you have to make the most of the time that you have. And that can be, as Kevin alluded to, praying and working on your catechist and your small group leaders. It means having your good lesson plan. It means having a few questions ready. And if you're just having an off day, if you're just tired or not feeling well or whatever, it can feel like a really missed opportunity. I think sometimes, like when I'm not on my game, it's like almost discouraged, you know what I mean? Discouraging. If you're like, on the flip side, I think my pastor is amazing at, like, without offending anyone, just being like, I know your face. I know you're here regularly. I know this about you. I think you come to the nine, but I don't remember your name. Could you share it with me? You know what I mean? And he just has such like an unassuming, he's so honest that people respond to it. Do you know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
I think those are some of the challenges I think of with this generation anyway.
Yeah. I think also, Jared, like what I had said earlier about, within the last 5, 7 years, noticing a change in how people perceive, how particularly young people perceive those in authority, whether
Mhm.
it's a teacher or a youth minister or a priest or a coach. Uh, whereas like when, not like back in the 1800s, but like, back when I was a kid, my parents told me like you always will show adults respect, and like it's to the point where like if I see my teachers from school in Stoughton, I still address them as Mrs. or Mr. And they're like, you can call me Amy. And I'm like, no, I can't. Mm-mm. Nope. And they're like, you know, I was only 4 years older than you when I was your teacher, right? And I'm like, doesn't matter. You're still, but uh, that level of respect for authority and kind of almost an innate trust. Like it was just an automatic trust because this person is a teacher, a coach, a priest, a youth minister, isn't necessarily there. And I mean, you can talk about all the cultural, sociological, psychological factors that contribute to that, but ultimately, it 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 is what it is, and the way to overcome it is, I think, by kind of embracing it and realizing like, okay, well, I'm going to take that as a challenge. Like I need to earn their respect and their trust. Like I'm going to give them my respect right from the get-go, but now I need to teach them why I'm giving them respect right off the bat or why I'm willing to, do XYZ. And um, I, I think, in the last, like I said, 5, 7 years, it's gotten worse, but I also do think it's getting better because whatever they are, Gen Zs, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, uh, they I think they're so disillusioned with the virtual relationships
Mm.
that when they do have a personal relationship with an authority figure, it's something that's so new to them that it's novel. Like they're like, oh, this is like, is this what I've been missing? And it's an opportunity, like that, like Jesus says, the harvest is ripe, and it's the opportunity to seize those moments and uh, really disciple them and what we call intentional discipleship. Going back to focus and Sherry Waddell.
Another thing that I thought of too while you were talking is that is like uh commitment level or what can feel overwhelming. My son attends church, not here, a different Catholic church with his friends, and it started with them being on the varsity baseball team, the kids, that they were in the playoffs or whatever, and they went together and they continue to go together. Now he's not even in high school anymore. And when they were seniors in high school, one of the kids that was attending mass with them, who didn't play baseball and wasn't baptized, just started going with them and was continuing to go to them, asked somebody how to become Catholic, like somebody that was at the church. And the answer was, you can come to RCIA, and it meets, 20 times, and, everybody, it's 30 plus, right? Like, and the kid's 18, right? Like that was their response. And so he was kind of like, whoa. So my son came home and was like, Mom, what do I do about this? Do you know what I mean? And I was like, well, let's take it in like a bite-sized piece, right? Like, let's just have a conversation. Do you know what I mean? And see where we're going and see what we're gonna do. Like sometimes I think like that idea of being willing to like take it in a small piece and see where it goes.
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, if you're gonna sign up for confirmation, there's 21 sessions and there's these classes, because people are overwhelmed, I think, easily right now by commitment. And I think, and I said, I just said to Owen, I said, you just order some pizza and have them over and just chat about it. Like there's two of you sitting in this room right now that are in high school that, practice your faith regularly. Like, let's just do this, as opposed to, you know what I mean? That over. And I think sometimes we go to that catechesis first. Like we go to that, like, I only have so much time to get this curriculum in, and I only have so much time, when really, if we kind of whet their appetite, they'll kind of keep coming back.
Mhm.
Not everyone, but the ones that want to. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you both very much. I think I'll put out my last call for questions. If anybody has any others, I'll give folks a moment to. Oh, Linda, go ahead.
Okay.
There you go.
I want to put in the third plug for Town Spa. I used to be invited as a guest speaker to Immaculate Conception in Stoughton, And the person who invited me would always take me to Town Spa afterwards. It was great. I had a couple of thoughts. One of the reasons I kind of was curious to, by the way, I'd like to thank both of you for your insights. It was a sort of a confirmation for a lot of things that I did. I taught in the Boston Public Schools for 34 years. But I was a little bit unsettled by the title because I think there is a blurred line between catechetics and relationship. To me, it's not relationship before catechesis, it's relationship with catechesis.
Mhm.
Um, there's a partnership between those two things. I taught science, and I used to stand at the door of my classroom when the bell rang and the kids came in. I would say hi to every kid. I would comment on their t-shirts. If they hadn't been in class for a while, I'd say, welcome back. To me, teaching, if it's not relational with the young, isn't good teaching. You
Mhm.
have to have a relationship with the kids. Um, so that the other thing, though, is to me, a relationship is catechesis. I
Mhm.
used to try to show my kids that they were valuable, that they mattered, whether they passed or failed, whether they liked science or not. One of the strangest backhanded compliments I ever got from a kid was, "We're not crazy about science, but we kind of like you." So it's to me, there's not that separation. Teaching the young has to be relational. Um, and I think relationship is intrinsically catechetical. The other thing, I'll just leave you a formula because since I've retired from full-time teaching, I've been reading a lot on psychology, and there is a child psychologist, Dan Siegel, and he gives a formula for raising healthy children. But when I read what he had to say, it occurred to me that he was talking about all relationships, and there were four components. Everybody wants to be seen, and I would also add heard. Everybody has, so the first the first thing to really see each individual kid, to hear what they have to say. Somebody who asked the question about different generations, when I went into the classroom, I decided that I would let every kid tell me who they were. They were not Gen X, they were not baby boomers. They were, I try to stay away. I mean, I pay attention to a little bit of it, but I let the kids tell me who they are. So they need to be seen. The second is they need to feel safe with you. And that takes time. That usually doesn't, it can happen automatic. So the first is to be seen. The second is to be safe. The third is to be comforted. If you ever want to read something that will break your heart, you can do a Google search for something called the ACE study. ACE is Adverse Childhood Experiences, and two-thirds of our kids have at least one severe adverse childhood experience. And I think since that ACE study, the kids need to be comforted when they're in distress. And then the last thing is they need to feel secure in it. Not that you perfectly deliver, but you're consistent. So there were four things: to be seen, to feel safe, to be comforted in distress, and to get those things consistently. It was just one of the greatest formulas, that I ever read. But I'd like to thank both of you. You've confirmed so much of what I tried to do as a teacher that it's been a delight listening to this tonight. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got
Can I,
Dan
can I,
Siegel's The Whole Brain Child right here.
Yeah.
can I just respond to that for a second? Because I think that the church, if you read its documents, I think Linda's right on. I think the church doesn't ask us to choose between relationship and catechesis. Like if we read the
Yeah.
documents correctly, right, then
Right.
they're asking us to just put them in the right order. And even
Yeah.
in
It
Linda's
just,
example, she was like, as they walked in the door to my classroom, you know what I mean? I greeted them at the door. So
yeah.
before they heard a lesson from someone, they saw that someone took a genuine interest in them rather than someone who's like, one of the things that frantically trying to get ready or whatever, and any of us who have taught in a classroom know that there's times that you're like that, right?
Yeah.
But here when we do family faith formation, even it took a long time with the team, even to be like, if the detail's not done, like a half an hour before the session's going to happen, then it's just not going to happen, because when the parents arrive and the kids arrive and they come into the setting, they need to feel like we are ready for them and that we want to
Yeah.
talk with them and that we want to do those things. And, we know that people come, and Father Kevin can probably elaborate on this even more, in all sorts of pastoral situations. They don't always come, what they come for isn't always what they need, right? So they may
Yeah.
come for one thing, but the need is something else. And the only way you're going to know that is if you're not all business, right? Like, and like you're able to like talk that conversation. So I just
Yeah.
think and I think the church documents should support that if we read them
Yeah.
correctly.
Well,
We
the
just
two
feel
great
like
commandments.
we only have so much time to get our stuff in, and we got to teach it. And otherwise they're not going to know that, they're not going to know the 10 commandments by the end of this. They're not going to know this. They're not going to know that. And I think sometimes that gets in the way.
Well, I think the kids remember two things anyway. They remember if you cared about them, and they remember if faith meant something to you. Those are the things that kind of, pique them. But all faith is about relationship. It's about our relationship with God and our relationships with each other. All of it is relationship. So, yeah, I'm not being picky, but when I heard the title, I was kind of like, it's all ultimately about relationship, I think, our relationship with God and our relationships with each other. So,
What? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, one thing I was going to say, Linda. Well, two things. First, was your friend Alice?
yes.
So, I think not to
Love Tospa.
not to date you or anything, but you came and spoke when I was in
Oh
Alice's
no, not
class.
another one.
So,
I
but that was
hope I
only a
hope it
couple of
went
years ago. So
I hope it went over well,
no, it did. It did. It was a pro-life. I remember it was the pro-life talk,
Yeah.
because you were a science teacher. But what I was going to say is one thing that I constantly told my students when I taught theology, but I tell the confirmation kids now is you need to define your terms, and you need to also like be willing to change your perspective, because we might be approaching something from a way that it wasn't intended to be given. So like for example, like I took this like to mean uh prioritizing relationship over catechesis was more programming than
Okay.
actual catechesis. Like, you know, why it is that our relationships with the young people matter more than, you know, filling up a calendar, or like, oh, well, we want to offer X amount of, opportunities for the youth to do service, and X amount for them to gather together for fun, or X amount for this. But, how do we catechize through our relationships? Relationships before curriculum. Thank you, Jared. Um, so,
I'll still struggle with that, but yeah, but
so,
I know what you mean,
and I mean, I think, yeah, like when I was in the classroom, we had curriculum maps, and it was it, particularly when I taught Spanish, it was by the time they leave your classroom should be 90% target language, 10% English. And so how do you do that throughout the course of the year? And so basically you do like a backwards design and say like, okay, well, if in June I need them to be here, then I need to do this in May, and this in April, and this in March, and this in. So, like, what is my ultimate goal for them? Long term, I want them to be saints, of course. In the temporal world, I want them to follow Jesus. So, you know, a curriculum can't teach you how to follow Jesus, a relationship can. And so,
yes.
how do I mirror my relationship with Jesus to them, that they're like, I want that. Like, I want, like, he's had such, whatever it is, like, he had such a hard time when XYZ happened, and he still smiles, or he still jokes, or, he still tells the best jokes, and, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
When you were talking, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was just going to say the second high school that I taught in, which was several years later, I actually wasn't a teacher. I wasn't a classroom teacher. I was the director of campus ministry. And so we had a meeting with the theology department, and they were great fine educators, right? And the chair of the department, we were in a meeting, and we were talking about what we were going to do. I was presenting kind of like a new structure for each year's levels retreat and service programs and what they were going to do. And one of the proposals on the table, two of the high schools I taught in were all boys. One was co-ed, and this was an all boys high school. And one of the things was that like one of the kids, like the activeness helped them open up a little more, right? If we gave them an experience, they would talk more and we could work alongside them, and it was great in all these things. So one of the proposals was that we do a service day for that year's retreat with reflection components, that we go out and do service in the community, come back, break it open, do those kind of things. And the chair of the department said, well, you're not a classroom teacher, so you may not understand, but that doesn't really tie with our curriculum.
Oh boy.
So I paused and I said, well, your curriculum's the New Testament. Right. So like to say that it doesn't matter. And it's not that he was a bad person or like a bad teacher, but he was just so funneled on like what it meant to teach the New Testament. Luckily, there was a priest next to me who came to my defense as well and said, I think Jeanne has a point. Do you know what I mean? But this is a guy who had been teaching at the time for 20 years, 25 years, was the chair of a theology department at a high school. So I just think he was so locked into like, this is the curriculum, this is the thing, this is what we're going to do, that he couldn't imagine that we could teach the New Testament working alongside a sophomore in high school. Do you know what I mean? That like, yeah. So I think that's why the title is what the title is. That's,
Yeah. No, I'm having this conversation helps me to sort it out, but I was very puzzled or wrestled with the title of tonight's talk. So, but this is really good. It's really good. And it's Jeanne, right? I am always glad to be called a teacher or a catechist. I don't know how. It's just been my life. I've been in the classroom since 1969, one way or another, and it's in my DNA. So, but maybe people are uncomfortable because sometimes people see teacher as hierarchical, and so, but I love being a teacher.
I actually think of it because I want them to listen more than they teach.
You want them to
listen, to break open conversation as opposed to impart knowledge. So teaching is imparting knowledge or giving, you know what I mean? So sometimes I just use a different type term to try to.
Yeah, there's a Protestant theologian, Paul Tillich, who had a great quote: "The first duty of love is to listen." And when we're teachers, we always want to talk. Yeah. So I had to learn to listen quite a bit too.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us. We are coming to the end of our time together. I don't know, if Jeanne or Father, if you have any closing thoughts. I'll give you each a moment for the last word if you want, and then I'll ask Father to close us in prayer and give us your blessing.
I'm okay.
I have no closing remarks.
Yeah,
all right.
Me neither.
We will be back next month. I should have looked up the date, but I didn't. But it's what is this, Thursday? So it's the second Thursday of February. We'll be talking about music ministry as it relates to youth ministry with our friends from the Vigil Project, who, if you were at the Hope for Life conference in the fall, they did the music for that. If you were at the National Eucharistic Congress, they do some music for that. And they'll actually be coming in March for a True Presence Night on March 24th, the eve of the Annunciation in Wilmington. And that is our next kind of major public youth ministry thing, or is next month's Zoom. There'll be another Zoom in March, and then a number of things, the Vigil Project, as well as a God's Planning Retreat coming in March. So check out our websites and look out for our emails. I think our next email is scheduled to come out next week with more of what we've got coming up. But Father, if you would close us in prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks and praise for this day, for this time together, and for the way in which you call us to minister to the youth here in the Archdiocese of Boston and in our particular parish settings. We ask that you inflame us with the heart of Don Bosco to be a teacher of the young, that you inflame our young people with the hearts of Carlo Acutis and Therese of Lisieux and all of the saints who have been children, who have shown older people, adults, how to love you with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. We ask that you continue to be with us in the process of discipling our young people here in the Archdiocese, so that as we model for them our relationships with you, so too they may choose to make it their way through a worthy manner of life. Mary, Queen of the new evangelization, we ask you to pray with us and for us as together we say, Hail Mary, full of grace,
Of grace.
the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is
Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy
Holy Mary, Mother of God,
Pray for
pray
us.
for us sinners now, at the hour of our death.
Amen.
Amen.
Lord be with you.
With
And
your
with your
spirit.
spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for what you do.
Yes, thank you both very, very much. And thank you all for joining us. The recording of last month and this month will be up at some point in the next few days, next few weeks maybe. We'll see about that. And we look forward to seeing you next time and out and about doing ministry and supporting each other in it.